The battle for fourth is well and truly on this season, isn't it? There's lots and lots of teams that look like they could pick up that fourth place. McLaren have really dropped the ball. You know, if you were talking to me at the beginning of the season, I'd have said the top four is pretty much guaranteed. I'd have said, you know, the likelihood is we're going to have those top three, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, and then McLaren are going to sit in fourth place fairly comfortably. But they have completely dropped off. And I think, honestly, there's 5 different teams that could pick up that fourth place position in Formula One, which makes it very, very exciting in the midfield. You know, last season we had a 3-way battle. This season, we could have a 5-way battle for fourth place in the Constructors' Championship. So let's delve into it and talk about each team, and I'll give you my opinion on whether or not I think they can hit fourth place. Let's start with Haas. They're currently in third position. Kevin Magnussen picking up 10 points in the first race of the season. And of course, Ferrari powered, which this season just looks like they have a new lease of life. They look absolutely phenomenal when it comes to the track. And everyone, I think, had them last this season when Nikita Mazepin was there. But the real X factor has come in Kevin Magnussen, come into the team, completely revitalizing the team and adding a completely different dynamic to the Haas team for the 2022 season. You know, it's gone from a dynamic where we've got 2 rookies, effectively. I know they've had 1 season under their belt, but it wasn't a real season of Formula One. They were basically back markers for the entirety of it. Yes, they got the experience on the track, but no experience of actually battling with those teams in front of them. And it's gone from that to bringing in Kevin Magnussen. He's got that star factor. He's shown that he can be a really, really consistent midfield driver. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Kevin Magnussen is the likes of, you know, up there for battling for championships. I don't think he's ever going to get that race win that eludes him so much. But I do think he has shown that he is a complete midfield driver and has that ability to do everything in the midfield battle. And then there's the Mick wildcard for me. Mick Schumacher, it's a bit 50-50 on him this season for me. He has shown that, you know, second season is usually his better season. We look back at all of his other formulas, Formula 2 in particular, that second season he really came to fruition. And now with Sebastian Vettel and Kevin Magnussen both being there for him, both pushing him on in Formula 1, I think that second season spark could ignite this year, and we could see Mick Schumacher really catch fire after the first few races when he's really settled into these 2022 cars. So Haas look really, really good for that fourth place for me. I think it's just whether or not Mick Schumacher can catch fire and whether Kevin Magnussen can keep up that consistency. The other Ferrari powered team that are in and amongst it though are Alfa Romeo, also Ferrari powered, new regulations coming in, and they look like they've got a new lease of life as well after getting rid of both of their drivers at the end of last season, completely revamping the team. Valtteri Bottas coming in, Zhou Guanyu coming in as well, and similar dynamic to Haas, one very experienced driver, one driver who is coming into Formula One, obviously doesn't have that season like Mick Schumacher, a complete rookie in the second seat. But for me, it depends on which Valtteri Bottas turns up for Alfa Romeo. Like, we know he's a race winner. He's got incredible experience, has been at Mercedes, and has won Constructors' Championship after Constructors' Championship. You cannot, you know, say that Valtteri Bottas didn't deserve those Constructors' Championships whilst he was at Mercedes. But there's still that question mark for me about Valtteri Bottas and whether or not he can do it in that midfield pack. You know, we've seen him qualify exceptionally well in a Mercedes and win races from that incredible qualifying position. It's his racecraft for me. It's, can he continue that racecraft, that race strategy? And even in the first race of the season, we saw Valtteri Bottas drop back into the pack quite considerably after what was an incredible qualifying performance. It took him the whole race and a fairly lucky safety car to get back into that position where he picked up 8 points. And over the course of the year, you know, you can't rely on safety cars to get lucky and get yourself back in there. So it's much tougher for Valtteri Bottas, I think, than the likes of Kevin Magnussen to battle through the pack. He hasn't been part of that midfield pack, and even when he was in a Mercedes last year, we didn't see him, you know, really cut through the pack like a Lewis Hamilton, like a Max Verstappen, even though he was in very similar hardware to there. And obviously, as I said, there's the rookie in Zhou. will he, be able to gauge Formula One in the right way? Will it take him 4, 5, 6 races to really get into it? Obviously, he picked up his first point in his first race, but we saw with Yuki Tsunoda last year, just because you pick up points in your first race doesn't mean it's going to lead to an incredibly good season. Like, he could go through those ups and downs, and I think just having a rookie in this what could be 5-way battle for the 4th place position in the championship will have its downsides over the course of the year and will be tricky to gauge where Alfa Romeo really can be. I think Alfa Romeo probably have the better car than Haas and a better team dynamic overall than Haas. Haas have those up and downs throughout the season. And if anything that is unlucky is going to happen, it's probably going to happen to Haas. Like, they are just a little bit cursed when it comes to unlucky things happening to them, whereas Alfa Romeo may be a little bit more settled, but they have that factor that both drivers are brand new to the team. It's going to be very close between those two. I think you could also throw AlphaTauri in the mix for this 4th place position. Pierre Gasly, let's just talk about him to begin with. Gasly is still on the come up right now. You can talk about Kevin Magnussen, you can talk about Valtteri Bottas, but they're two drivers that are coming towards the end of their Formula One career. Pierre Gasly is absolutely electric, sensational when it comes to his pace in qualifying and in the races, in my opinion as well. I think he doesn't really put a foot wrong when it comes to the races. Genuinely, I think the AlphaTauri question mark comes with the team. Obviously, they've got that Red Bull engine, which looks to be the best engine in terms of straight line speed all of a sudden. We're looking at the Saudi Arabia free practices, and they are the fastest teams through that DRS zone. So maybe that Red Bull engine, if they can get the consistency out of it and it doesn't just explode like we saw last weekend, they can really put something together that is special. But it's the strategy for me. It's the hiccups that come with AlphaTauri. They always seem to risk things. They always want to be the team that goes the opposite direction. And I think, honestly, that cost them last year. And the reason that Alpine came in front of them in the constructors was because they just took too many weird risks. They took too many strategy changes that were just unnecessary and unneeded, and that cost Pierre Gasly over the course of the season quite considerably. I know he got over 100 points last year, but I think he could have got even more than he did if AlphaTauri would have just gone with the strategy that people were going for around them, but they tried to go something different. And then there's the Yuki Tsunoda factor. In a similar vein to Mick Schumacher and Joe, you just don't know what you're going to get with Yuki Tsunoda. I think Yuki Tsunoda has come in with a lot more hype, but therefore there's a lot more pressure on Yuki Tsunoda. If Mick Schumacher doesn't deliver, I don't think Haas really put that much pressure on him. If Joe doesn't deliver for Alfa Romeo, I don't think there's that much pressure on him. If Yuki Tsunoda does not deliver, Red Bull ramp on the pressure. And I know that he is the only driver in a Red Bull car to have picked up points in the first race of the season, but I don't think that puts him in any better a position. Red Bull are cutthroat. If Yuki Tsunoda does not perform, Yuki Tsunoda will not be in that car for very long. And I don't know about Yuki. Again, in qualifying, we didn't see him put together a lap that was that good. Yes, he did really well in the race, sort of did good enough to get himself through the pack and ended up being in that point scoring position when Gasly and the other two Red Bulls dropped out of the race. But I don't know. I need to see more from Yuki Tsunoda this year. I need to see that real level up. In a similar vein to Mick, he needs to really show that second season can click for him and that he can do that little bit better. I think the 4th team in and amongst it for the 4th place position is Alpine. And Alpine are kind of in a bit of a weird one for me. They haven't got the links to other teams and possibly the worst engine out of Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, because they just haven't got that links to other teams around them. They are their own outfit. They're the only team running that Renault. And therefore, when the upgrades come for other teams, Ferrari will upgrade their car and that will trickle down to Haas and Alfa Romeo. Red Bull will upgrade their car. That will trickle down to AlphaTauri. There's not that trickle down effect for Alpine. They've got to do it all on their own. But I think they do have the better driver dynamic. Like, if we just look at the grid this season, Alonso and Ocon, what a balance in that team they have got. And, we've talked about Haas, the fact they've got one driver that you're, hanging a 50-50 over. Joe, you're hanging that 50-50 over. Yuki Tsunoda, it could go one way or another. Alonso and Ocon are just both really, really good. And Alonso, obviously being the most experienced driver on the grid this season, has been there, done it. And, of these teams, we're only talking about one world champion. and it is Fernando Alonso. Yes, it was a little while ago. Yes, he's been in Formula One for a very good time, but he's been there and done it. He's had the ups and downs. He's been a world champion. He's been battling for, just points when it came to that McLaren season, and McLaren was just cursed while he was there. He has been up and down. He's done every single thing you can in Formula One, and I think that really does help the team dynamic, and I think that will help Alpine take those steps forward over the course of the season. It's just whether they can take those steps forward on their own when they don't have a dynamic where, they've got another team to work with, they've got numbers from other teams to bounce off of and sort of communicate with in that way. And then Esteban Ocon, we're talking about Mick Schumacher, Joe, and Yuki Tsunoda being the second drivers in the team. A second driver of the quality of Esteban Ocon is absolutely wonderful to have. He has shown that he is more than capable of being in Formula One for the long haul. He's got that mentality. We've seen him win a race now in Formula One. We've seen him almost get another podium last season as well. He really does stand out for me in terms of those driver pairings that we're seeing in these teams and in these cars over the course of this season. I think Alonso and Ocon is an incredible dynamic to have. I think if Alpine had a Ferrari power unit, they'd easily be fourth place in this Constructors' Championship. I genuinely think it would not be a contest between Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri and Alpine if they just had that link to another team, if they were able to, use another team's data and dynamic to really improve their car over the season. But they don't. And that's what makes this so interesting. That's what puts Alpine really in and amongst this battle for fourth place for me. And then finally, I think there's a fifth team in there for fourth place. This might just be me being absolutely delusional, especially because, the team is in turmoil and the Mercedes power unit looks like the worst power unit by a long, long way. But in terms of the drivers, I think Daniel Ricciardo is better than Kevin Magnussen and Bottas for me, and is in and amongst that Alonso Ocon, thought process. Even better than Ocon, obviously, but is he better than Alonso? Possibly on his day, but Alonso, a little bit older. Daniel Ricciardo also, you'd say, is winding down in his career, but still has that ability. And just, if he can get comfortable in the car this year, if he can really, show McLaren why he was the driver they picked up. McLaren picked him up because they thought he was going to come into this team and make that difference. And I still think that he can. And then Lando Norris, just one of the future stars of Formula One for me. I put him in that same bracket as George Russell. People talk about George Russell as being a future world champion, given the right car, given Mercedes, are battling at the top still. I think Lando Norris is exactly there as well. A phenomenal season from him last year. I know that it kind of fell away towards the end of the year. He got very unlucky with reliability issues and punctures towards the end of the season, but is phenomenal. And I think if McLaren can upgrade, if McLaren can show that quality that they did last year, and if they can deliver a car that is even close to this fourth place battle, Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo are the two drivers you'd want to really drag you up in this field and push yourself into that fourth place position. But that's just my thoughts on it. It's going to be very, very close. Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, Alpine, McLaren. I could see any of those five teams being in fourth place going towards the end of the season. I think it's going to be very close between them. I'd love to know your thoughts. Obviously, we've only got one race under our belts, but what do we think? Who is going to come fourth out of those teams? And actually, if you want to hear Cars with Connor and CF Racing's thoughts on this, I did a podcast with them over on the pre-race podcast channel. It's the three of us. We talk Formula One. We build up to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It was a wonderful, wonderful time to have with them. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. I would highly recommend checking that out. But as I said, we talked about fourth place on there as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Which of these teams looks most likely to get fourth place right now? Obviously, we've got to take into account that the season is, geared up for those to be racing on and off the track. There are going to be upgrades. There's going to be upsets. And I'm more than happy to bring it to you live every single weekend. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.